This is the network service of the NTA.
Yes, you know, every day we go through different challenges as individuals or collective, but the good thing is the fact that we are still alive to face these challenges, and it gives us another opportunity to get things right. And obviously, things that we did not get right yesterday, today, we can ensure that, or rather, we can work towards ensuring that we get it right. Welcome to the studios of Weekend Deal. It's always a pleasure to have you join us on the show. My name is Suleiman Babajia Usman, and today we are going to be looking at civil service. Yes, it is the engine room of any government in the sense that it helps in the implementation of its policies and programs, because for any developing nation like Nigeria, civil service is very, very important because it helps fast track any effort and ensuring that we attain sustainable development in the country. But of course, you know that civil service is confronted with a lot of challenges. We talk about the working condition, we talk about, training, capacity building, we talk about corruption, welfare, and all of that. Today, stay with us on the show as we're going to take an in-depth look at some of this issue. Yes, we're going to go to different parts of the country to get, reports, and also have a guest join us on the show to really dissect this issue. Okay, if you just join us, this is Weekend Day, showing on the largest TV network in Africa, and today we are going to be taking an in-depth look at civil service in Nigeria. Of course, we earlier established the fact that civil service is instrumental in the implementation of government policies and programs towards ensuring a sustainable development in the country. We know that civil service is also confronted with a lot of challenges, but this background report put together by Francis will set the tone for our conversation on the show today. So let's take this.
There is no gainsaying that civil service is central and inevitable to any government and good governance. The civil service model being operated in Nigeria has its origin in British colonial administration. Although the British did not leave a large civil service system, it left a civil service that was efficient and effective. This tradition was carried out until few years after independence, when the creation of states in 1976 depleted the service of its capable hands.
The quality has gone down, no doubt about that. The incentives reduced more so after the 1975 purge. So people opted for civil service in the past because of the permanence. But 1975 removed the veil of permanence. I remember when we were in school, some of my classmates boldly would tell you upon graduation, they will move into civil service, bid their time, and get up there. And we would tease because young students full of ideas. I remember one of them, we started calling him SSG. Go to civil service and start moving the ladder gradually. But by 1975, that permanence was not there. So how would you trade in your youth, go on a journey that could be terminated midstream? So it became a thing that you accepted because you didn't have a choice. But the earlier civil servants had choice. So that some of us who opted for the civil service were not second rate.
While the civil service provides the machinery and acts as a springboard for the development and consolidation of programs, some experts have argued that corruption in the civil service is encouraged by weak government institutions. poor pay incentive, lack of openness and transparency.
When you talk about civil servants, their own is because they see billions on paper, and they know that time is everything. If they withhold treating that file, you may lose that. And people are in a hurry to get. So corruption comes in terms of give and take. Of course, corruption is pervasive in the civil service because the public sector is too large. Like the governor of Borno aptly captured it. You have a director who earns less than 500,000 staying in Abuja. 500,000 cannot even give you a 2-bedroom apartment. Yet he is sitting at the table where he sees billions.
A number of reforms have been made nationally to reposition the civil service for better service delivery. The question still remains, have these reforms been able to make the necessary impact?
Reforms are not cast in stone. Reform is to bring an institution, right, to page, at par with the reality. That's why you have reforms. Reform is an ongoing process.
The issue of poverty is a multidimensional concept synonymous with inability to attain a minimum standard of living, low quality of life, and lack of control over one's life and future. The picture in developing nations is not different, especially among civil servants in Nigeria.
When you see the average civil servant graduated level 8, the next promotion, if he's lucky, 3 years after or 4, he's on 9. Another 3-4 years later, he's on 10. And by the time he has clocked 20 years in service, some may not have moved more than 3 steps, 3 levels, right? And if he's lucky or unlucky, he stays in Lagos or he stays in Abuja, he can't even use his salary to afford a 1-bedroom apartment, right? What about transportation? Of course, you know, residence is locational. The closer you are to the center, the more expensive. So in order to make ends meet, they leave outskirts, meaning the transportation drive will be more. I mean, it's a very complex thing. So the average civil servant in Nigeria, it's a difficult thing.
Management of life after retirement entails planning for the unpredictable and unavoidable new lifestyle when one withdraws from active service. Therefore, the need to plan, adopt, and implement strategies to ease the pain and problems associated with life after retirement cannot be overemphasized.
I've been commissioner for finance, right? You project this year you are going to spend 10 naira. At the end of the year, you've not even earned 6 naira. So what's the first casualty? Capital projects. Second casualty, those who are powerless to assert their right. And these pensioners were people who served their nation to the best of their ability, but they are no longer in office. Some people are now sitting over their welfare. Of course, those who are current, if they are owed 2 months, they are striking. They say they won't go to work. If a pensioner is owed 6 months, would you stop going to work? He has already stopped going to work. The class that deserves our pity and our attention, what waits for you at the end of your journey normally will influence, right, how you react and respond while in office.
Our focus on Weekend Deal today will be on the civil service in Nigeria as the engine room of governance.
Thank you, Francis, for that background report. And let me just remind you that you can be a part of this conversation by sending in your contributions. If you have questions, you can do that as well, because we're going to have somebody very important to join us much later to talk about some of these, issues. Now, we know that the civil service is, a lot of people would tell you that growing up, it was very, very exciting to be part of that community, you know, to serve the nation, you know, in good way. But these days, if you see a young person, you know, they think twice if truly they want to be a part of the civil service because of some of the challenges earlier exposed in that report put together by Francis. But as a young person, would you like to be a part of civil service? Now, Kachi attempt to answer this question in this next feature.
For many young Nigerians, civil service employment is a polarizing topic. Many opt for entrepreneurship or private jobs to bypass the many issues plaguing the Civil Service Commission.
I'm not interested in civil service. I believe they are not properly paid. They are not really working as they should. I believe there are some offices that are dormant, that are not productive. The bureaucratic bottleneck, if they can be removed, or should I say stripped of their powers, I don't know how.
Our fathers who got the opportunity to be permanent secretary directors or deputy directors, they keep on increasing their years, year in, year out. 35 years, 60 years, you see somebody of 80 years, you say it's just for 45 years. So they hinder young people getting access to civil service jobs. How many years they have announced recruitment in civil service? It has been almost 10 to 15 years to 16 years. What they usually doing, what they normally do is replacement. And this replacement, you must know Mr. A, Mr. B, Mr. C, Mr. E.
Despite the obstacles, civil service remains an attractive option for some.
When you're a civil servant, there's this hope that your job is secured, that after retirement you have something to take care of yourself and also take care of your family. I, for one, I have applied several places to the extent that even some people have asked you to bring money, to enable me get a job. At the end of the day, nothing worked out. And we are somehow discouraged, we the youth are discouraged in the sense that we see it as, if you don't have connection, especially in Abuja, if you don't have connection, you get nothing.
Most young people, they want to earn their own business so as to make more money, because they see that as working for the government is a waste of time. Because most at times, you check the money you make working for yourself and then for the government. But for me, working for the government is a good one, because you add your own quota to the development of the nation. Their salary should be increased because it's not really encouraging. Their take-home pay is not really able to take them home. So if their salary can be increased and then their work spelled out specifically what to do, and the Servicom is there to checkmate them, ensure you deliver.
Undoubtedly, the Commission is in need of rehabilitation. While opinions differ on its potential in this regard, the hope is that making room for more young people in civil service will revitalize the nation's government and add to national development.
An interesting one there, and of course I have joined me in the studio right now to talk further about some of these issues highlighted so far. The acting chairman, National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission, Mr. Ebo Nta. You're welcome to our studios.
Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Nta, from the report I just finished, you listen to young Nigerians, expressing their who are skeptical about joining the civil service because of poor remuneration, poor condition of service. I know jobs are hard to come by, but of course you cannot, just do away with some of their concerns. Are those genuine concerns, given your experience with civil service?
Oh, very, very, very well. They actually have a right to be very concerned, because as I was listening to them, it took my mind back to when I was at their age too. I remember that in this country, the Federal Civil Service Commission used to go around universities interviewing students who were yet to graduate in their final year as to what areas of the Federal Civil Service we wanted to work with. And we always looked forward to having them come round And because at that time it was the desire of every young graduate to go into the public sector. Basically because of the attractions and the stability that was prevalent then.
What were the attractions?
First attraction was that you had a tenure system where you knew that with merit you could get to the top of your job, and that you, in fact for us, the first attraction was that as soon as you get into the civil service, within a few months you'll be given a car loan to buy a car, and that was generally 3,600 naira.
Oh, interesting.
With that, you could buy, you could buy a Volkswagen car, and if you had a master's, you probably would get into the civil service at a slightly higher level, and the attraction was that you would get 4,800 naira, which was enough to get you a brand new Peugeot car, air-conditioned. And of course, the other interesting factor was the training opportunities. Most of the early civil servants who joined the services of that time and even before then had the training that their counterparts anywhere in the world would have. You would find Nigerian civil servants in the UK, in the US, Canada, undergoing training at different levels of their job growth. You were prepared for the next level. And so you actually would see that you were very well equipped. And one other factor too, which I still remember, was that we had an open check for health.
Wow.
The public sector employment was ready to give you the best medical opportunity for you and your family. It was not capped. The government then was ready to spend any amount to make sure that you were okay in terms of your health. Compared to the private sector then, which had a fixed amount that was given to you on a yearly basis, and beyond that you had to source for your health needs.
You know, Barrister Nta, you're saying this and you're making it look so rosy, you know, so interesting, and then one is left with no choice but wanting to just go back to the good old days. But that's one of the problems we have in this country. Anytime we experience challenges, we always want to go back to the good old days, not projecting to what should happen tomorrow, like in the future. We should be looking forward to better things ahead. But at what point did the rain begin to beat us?
I think the first major problem came when there was this general purge in the civil service. And that introduced an element of instability in the mind of the civil servants, who initially thought that the moment he got a job in the civil service, he was assured that short of misconduct, gross misconduct on his part, he was going to be there for 35 years or until he was age 60, because he had those two conditions. To the extent that you could not be removed unless you did something really against public service norms. So there was that stability, and you were given a fair hearing. But to one day wake up and discover that you no longer had a job, and you didn't prepare for this, there was no safety net that you could go back and start working on. And you must also look at the age of some of the people who were affected. There are certain ages where if you get out of a job, it's most unlikely that you'll get a new job in a formal sector. So when things like this started happening, those who survived the system and those who were now coming in started planning for what I call self-help. And that introduced the magnitude of corrupt practices that had never really existed in the public sector then. In the days where you were given a loan, say a car loan, the typical servant would do everything to make sure that he does not renege on that agreement. He will pay you back to the last kobo. To a situation now where if you were given such monies, you were looking at aspects of how not to pay. So quite a number of processes like that continue to erode the confidence and stability of the civil servant. As of then, we had very close parity between the public sector and the private sector. In fact, it was much more honorable to work in the public sector then. And to a situation where the private sector started earning more money, getting more opportunities of training, getting better conditions of service, and it now became less attractive, so to speak.
Now, I know we'll talk more about some of these issues, and I know that as immediately some of our viewers cite you on set, I'm sure a lot of them would want to ask questions about, you know, the salary disparity and all of that. But just before we go there, we have had several reforms, even before independence and after independence. You have a lot, really. And then you wonder, why have we struggled to implement some of these reforms aimed at, you know, improving the efficiency of the civil servants?
If you look at the early reforms, some started as early as 1934. And we've had several up to even a few years ago. Quite a number of those reforms have not come out on the basis of specially designed routine processes. They've come out of pressure, they've come out of agitations. And when you are making reforms on the basis of pressure applied on you, some decisions might not be given sufficient maturization or processes that you can test out before applying. At the time, we had this unified public service salaries where everybody earns the same thing, which was one of the reforms. And then the university lecturers came up and said, no, given the nature of our job, we cannot really be placed on the general UGSS scale where everybody is earning the same thing. And the committee was set up to review it, and they agreed and pulled out the university lecturers as of then. As soon as this happened, the medical sector also came in and said, look, we don't think we should remain in the general sector. Then other professional groups came in. Then parastatals started insisting that we do more in terms of our roles, and that's how those disparities got built in till today. The moment you tweak one sector, other sectors will be waiting to insist, including your sector.
Presently, we have Steve Oronsaya's report. And of course, a lot of commentators, analysts say that if that reform or the review is implemented, it will certainly go a long way in reducing cost of governance, in ensuring that we have, efficiency, improve efficiency of civil service and service delivery. And we really don't know why, some of these good things are struggling for implementation. We know that there is a white paper on it and a review of that white paper as well. So talk to us further about it.
When you're looking at reforms, you must also look at what was the reason that necessitated that reform or the agitation for that reform. If we did not have an economic crunch in the country, would you be asking for reforms? You probably would not, because government was at that point able to meet everybody's need. But if you begin to situate your reforms, particularly of the civil service and the public sector organizations, on the basis of economic pressures and reality, you might actually be creating more problems than you intend to solve. I'm happy you talked about the white paper, because as soon as that Orosanya report came out, quite a number of disagreements came up from various agencies and service providers, and the government set up a white paper to review that and further improved on that report. And there was still yet another look at the white paper. As we speak, the Bureau for Public Service Reforms, BPSR, has done a lot of work in trying to harmonize a lot of the activities that had taken place since that Orosanya report came out. Nigeria is not a country that is operating on its own. It's part of a committee of nations. So some of the things you expect to do today, if you don't do it, other nations have done it. And when you want to implement certain aspects of the reform report you had done several years ago, international pressure would come in to change the pattern. Look at the ease of doing business. There are certain things you do in this country that is not acceptable to the international community. So if you had taken reform processes based on 10 years ago, it doesn't fit into present-day reality. So we must make our reforms on the basis of research. And that must be continuous. It's not when you have a problem, you now do a knee-jerk reaction. No. We must approach public service reforms on a continuous basis, which was one of the recommendations that actually brought into birth the National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission. Because all these things we've been doing in the public sector were on the basis of ad hoc committees and commissions that were set up at DEBO and the rest of them. And so one of the major recommendations was that they should have a body that is addressing real-time reforms and advise government on a very regular basis, which is what the Salaries and Wages Commission is doing and is expected to do. And then you can now take decisions based on that.
Now, we can, we'll talk more about this commission, National Salary and Wages Commission, which you, of course, are the head now. But let's look at some aspects of this Oronsaya's report.
Yes.
There's a bit that there's a need to merge some, ministries or MDAs, parastatals, because they perform almost the same function. And then to collapse some of them, or rather to see some of them from existing. And then we are talking about this, and then you see new, agencies and new commissions coming up. Are we not going back to those things that we wanted to do differently, most especially with this reform?
Let's look at it on the basis of emerging job trends. There are certain, look at the function of the confidential secretary and the typist. 15, 20 years ago, every establishment, if you wanted to type a letter, it was a typist who had to do that manually. I'm not sure you've seen any typewriter in the last 5-6 years. The process has changed. It's gone to computers, and those who were typists in the old setup are no longer relevant today. So jobs keep changing, and that's the function of doing job evaluations to see what are the new trends. I would like to give a specific example in the health sector. If you had to go in for a major surgery in the past, they will open you up extensively. But today we've moved to processes where you have pinpoint surgery. They put a camera down and look at what you're doing, and by the next day you are out of the hospital. So jobs keep changing like that. I will look at, say, the Humanitarian Services Ministry, which has just been set up. That has come as a result of the pressures that you have large IDP camps, you have mass movements of people who are displaced in their communities. So setting up such a ministry to address the specific issue, would you consider that to be out of place? No, it's not. But sometimes you might have to merge existing ministries, departments, if they are performing similar roles. That I don't see any issue about, but as things... Okay, look at the digital economy now, which is taking a lot more prominence and moving away from an oil-based economy. This is the new reality of life. But the point I'm trying to make here is that before you discard a process, you must have better alternatives. And then running a lean government is the world order today. Running a lean government so that some of the functions you used to do where government was a regulator, was also a service provider, and would sit to judge his own performance where delivery is not met, it has to begin to give way slightly to where certain functions must be taken on by the private sector. And one major success has been in the telecom industry, when you had a monopoly under the NITEL, which has now been broken up, and you have private sector competition and you have better services. You know how much a SIM card was when mobile phones came into
It was
play?
quite expensive.
Yes, but today, mobile SIM cards are free in order to attract you to buy.
Now, I know at some point you played host to the Medical and Dental Consultant Association of Nigeria, where you told them that, you know, people need to find out more about the, you know, act establishing your commission. It's not just about salary review. And then we'll talk more about that after we must have taken this next feature, you know, put together by Charles Obike. It's on salary and wages.
Civil servants' salary, income and wages are corresponding issues that relate with staggering and declining economy of Nigeria.
The salary of a civil servant, average civil servant, cannot afford to keep the family going, simply because everything in Nigeria, the price have been hiked, skyrocketed, even foodstuff, call it fuel, except salary. Salary increase, you can remember that NLC suffered dialogue with the federal government. This is my first time of hearing that federal government want to increase salary, they increase on percentage. It's not done. I'm a union man. I have been negotiating for salary increment before. So for them to come out and start saying that so salary grade level, we get so percentage, it's wrong. If you check it, the only increment you will see in somebody's salary is like my own is 3,000. So you will find out that average civil servant cannot boast of 3 square meals on his table with his family.
Whirling nightmares linked with delayed underpaid benefits and remunerations result to degrees of domestic challenge.
They have family to cater for, they have relatives, they have other bills to foot, a lot of things like that. inflation rate has increased. So even to fend for their families, take for instance, somebody that is employed at level 8, taking home 50,000. What will he do with 50,000 when he has rent to pay?
They have a lot of bills before feeding. And after everything, if this salary is being paid and they go to the market, foodstuff, there are children, school fees. So I don't really, the government should really do something about it.
Would you like to work with the government?
According to the way I'm saying things, I prefer being a businesswoman than working on the public sector.
With bitter expectations, a vast majority of civil servants spend years of formal and administrative period on structuring core government policies, human and capacity building.
The whole policy of government is to be executed by the civil servants. Have they done well? To some of us, the answer is no. Because if they have done well, they will not even be talking about their own welfare. Because nobody fixes their salary for them. Those who manage the National Salaries Income and Wages Commission are civil servants. Even the issue of pensions, no outsider manages pensions. It is civil servants. So we expect the civil servants, be the engine room, to have done well, both for themselves and then for the masses. Mine is to urge the civil servants to wake up from their slumber. Take the job of the civil servant as the engine, the heart of execution of projects of government. That will benefit them and then benefit the masses. So for now, what they are getting, for me, is not good. Can they get better? Yes, they can. If they work harder, they will do better.
With accountability, measurable results for effective solutions in Nigeria's civil service strata will be appreciated.
An interesting one there, put together by Charles Obike. Now, Mr. Anta, you listen to that report. You listen to the respondents from different age groups, and then now it's not about the take home. That take home cannot even take you halfway back to your home, and then you wonder, when will this change? Because sometimes you realize that some people are earning more and doing less than some people who are doing more.
The last respondent gave two positions which are very interesting. First, he said that the civil service pay and the pensions are controlled by the civil servants, correct? In terms of public sector employees. But that if they do more, their situations would be better. Now, I have always been an advocate for living wages paid to people who work. That's why government has a minimum wage act in place, that nobody should earn below a certain threshold if you are to have decent living. But you see, when you're determining remunerations in the public sector, a few other considerations have to come in. Considerations like ability to pay by government. We are in a country where at one time spending money was not an issue. And then as contending factors begin to arise, you begin to look at your pocket and cut your coat. But the point is this. Are we in the public sector giving the best of our performance? I would say no, for a lot of reasons. And one major factor we keep harping on is remuneration. We forget other factors that made the early civil servant give his life to the public sector.
What was there?
Look at the schooling system. I lived in the west of Nigeria. My father was a civil servant, my mother was a civil servant. But we were attending free primary schools in Ibadan. The government was running free primary schools then. And we had a meal. So the parents did not really have to bother. And these were public schools. We hardly, if you went to a private school as of that time, it meant that you had a problem. The hospitals were easily accessible. So the civil servant could have his family treated properly. Another support infrastructure, transportation in Ibadan then was 5 kobo when we lived there. Small Maurice minor vehicles. Now you have a situation where for you to send your child to a good school, it has to be a private school. And you're going to pay, no matter what your salary is, you're going to pay substantial part from nursery to university.
But let me just ask you, how long does it really take to have like a department or ministry or agency like NTA? How long does it take to go through that review process of their salary? How long really?
It depends.
And what are the criteria you look at?
First is whether you are revenue generating.
Okay.
If you generate substantial revenue yourself in NTA, and you come with conditions of service that I need to have more allowances because I spend more time in the office, it's not like the regular civil servant who is going to spend 8 hours in the day. For your kind of job, you might end up actually spending like 12 hours.
As a matter
and of course, when you're at home,
we spend, in fact, sometimes 24 hours
yes,
you're working.
Yes, from my experience, I'm fully aware of that. I had a meeting with the Inspector General of Police very recently. They are also in the public sector. But have you really found any policeman who is doing an 8-hour shift? Because of the number of personnel they have compared to the population. They are as busy as you are, running shifts of 12 hours, 24 hours, particularly in remote stations. If you tell anybody in such a police station to go on an 8-hour shift, the station will be empty. So we have to take into consideration all those kind of processes. Are you a commercial entity with government interest? Are you fully empowered to run your affairs? Or are you depending on the treasury for every kobo that has to be paid to you? So if you're going to depend on the treasury, it is most unlikely that you would get the kind of allowances that you would love to have. So we take all these kind of things into consideration.
So is it a classical case of some all animals are equal, but some are more important than the others?
Unfortunately, you would want to see it in that way. But you see, if you're coming to a central treasury, certain considerations have to be taken into place. Which is to say that NTA, for example, could begin to look at if private sector equivalent of NTA is surviving in the country. How are they making their money? Can we change a few of our policies to match that? Is it not ironical that every government department wants to come to NTA and they will ask you to do their adverts for them free? And they call it public service interest, in the interest of the public service. Are you going to use water to generate all the processes that you're doing? So let them also begin to put in their budget, if I'm going to pay private sector television houses 1 million, at least let me put 100,000 that I would give to NTA to give me similar services. At the same time, NTA must also improve on its services such that it's first choice for me to go there to have service than for me to go to a private sector organization. So these competencies must be there. In fact, one of the cardinal functions of the Salaries and Wages Commission is to work towards parity between public sector and private sector.
Well, I also know that there's presidential committee on the harmonization of salaries
and wages
and I know you are a part of that committee. Where
Yes.
are we now, really?
That committee has actually started working, and I must say it will bring a lot of sanity. It's one committee that I am very, very happy with. It will bring a lot of sanity into the system, because on that committee you have the Minister of Finance. The Minister of Finance is actually the chair of that.
Co-chair.
The alternate chair is the Minister of Labor.
Yeah.
Yes. So you have the budget office represented there. You have the accountant general. In fact, almost all the parties that are in the business of regulating what allowances people should get and what salaries people should get. Because I might, for example, be very willing to improve on the allowances and salaries of NTA staff.
Oh, interesting.
But when it comes to payment, I'm not the one who is going to pay.
Okay.
It has to go to the budget office, and the budget office would say,
have
well,
to look at their books.
Sorry, we don't have the kind of funds that will match your recommendation. So that's why this presidential committee is a good mix that all parties can look at the different scenarios and come up with a
workable
process that would allow everybody. But you must also note that the office of the head of service of the Federation is more interested in the infrastructure that supports the civil servants
just
perform
like
better.
You earlier mentioned, and then some people are saying that it's because of this, salary disparity that some people, are dragged into corruption in this. I mean, that's why we have corruption in the civil service. But everything has genesis, and that is exactly what we are looking at in the next report.
Anything that you're trying to trace, when did it start, or how did it emerge, or where did we go wrong? You have to start from the beginning. You realize that by the time we got independent and we had a structured civil service that was literally copied from the British system, people were very contented. They were specifically trained to either be secretaries, to be admin officers. Cadres are very straightforward. Technical people are doing their technicalities with the supervision and leadership of a bit of the colonial masters. And everything was fairly okay. Those early civil servants were not particularly hungry to enrich themselves. They were not greedy. And they were fairly looked after. And in those days, even when people retire, you will find that they never had anything. There are people who retire and they only depend on their pension and so on and so forth. But certainly nowadays that's not the case. The motivation, the morale boosting, the consideration of the civil servant to be looked after, I think is getting weaker and weaker. Now where we are is civil servants, there's no housing for civil servants. Yes, there are programs here and there trying to build owner-occupiers and so on and so forth, but the impact is not as strong as it used to be. There used to be vehicle loans for civil servants. I don't think that is there anymore. And the salary reviews, the disparity. Look at an NNPC worker who probably could be on the same level as somebody in the mainstream Ministry of Petroleum. The disparity of their salary, even their drivers, is very, very wide. I know of some parastatals where the lowest paid people, like drivers and so on and so forth, are earning more than assistant directors, deputy directors. So that disparity also creates some kind of hunger for doing the wrong thing. Then you start asking questions. How come whether it's a politician or a civil servant who is on this salary scale, has this house, has this type of cars, whose children are schooling outside, who is going into private hospital, and so on and so forth? The answer certainly will be there must be some kind of extra income somewhere. And unfortunately, most of it comes through corrupt practices.
Well, an interesting take from Dr. Bindri there, and we still have our guest here with us. But like I did promise, you've sent in your messages, and I'm going to take a few of them. At least our guests can get to, respond to some of them. This one is coming from Abdul Umar. He's a retired civil servant. Now, he says one of the worst reforms now is the contributory pension scheme, which is skewed to favor the service providers to the detriment of the civil servant on his or her retirement, as he is given only 50% of his or her savings, while the rest is spread over a period of 25 years, and he or she gets a paltry sum every month. The government have not considered retirees' clamor for at least 75% of their total contribution to enable them have something tangible to start business ventures. Must pensioners continue to allow in penury while pension service providers sit on and enjoy the fruits of their sweat while in service? The next one says, this one says, National Mortgage Bank is funded with public civil servant pension contributions. National Mortgage Bank car loans available for their staff alone. Other public and civil servants are not allowed access to such loans. Okon Onen from Calabar. And the next one says the civil service has been so deteriorated by unnecessary bureaucracy that young Nigerians are no longer captivated by it. Imagine getting an appointment in civil service for over 2 years, no salary, even after you have been captured by IPPS. Arrears are being siphoned by top officials in the service, and let alone getting car loan on first 28 days after being posted. The federal government needs to look urgently into civil service if she really seriously about implementation of government policies and programs. This is Ahmed Abdul Okene from Kogi State.
Let me take the very first contributor who said that under the contributory scheme, you take 50% of your savings. That's not correct. The maximum you can take there is 25%. And then the balance is spread over a number of years. If you prefer the phased disbursements, or if you alternatively you decide to do an annuity, which is like an insured package, that could be higher, but it also has certain conditions that go with it. I think that civil servants and their unions should be having regular meetings with the Pensions Commission, Salaries and Wages Commission, and the PFAs to see processes that can benefit the civil servants. I'll look at what happened before the contributory scheme started. Any civil servant that was retiring had a gratuity. And the impression now is that under the contributory scheme, you don't have the equivalent of a gratuity. But if you look at the Act, it still provides that agencies can make provisions and discuss these provisions on how to better the lot of their civil servants who are retiring. And for the period I've had to serve with the Salaries and Wages Commission and looking at conditions of service, most of the cooperative societies set up by civil servants are not addressing long-term issues. They are addressing very short-term processes. And I think they should begin to up their game by getting consultants to advise them, because some of these cooperatives have so much money, but at the end of the year, December, they buy rice and oil and distribute. That will not solve the problem. But if you're investing in processes that earn you more money on a long-term basis, even after you retire, it makes a lot more sense. Currently, before you retire, 3 months before you retire, that means you are probably 60, less 3 months, is when you are required to come in for training for post-retirement life. My attitude to that, unfortunately, is that in the 3 months left for you to be 60 and exit, I don't see any wonderful skill that you would acquire that will give you self-sufficiency. I would rather advocate that from the day you join the civil service, pick out an area of business you want to do which is constitutionally approved. That's agriculture. You can go into direct agriculture or applied agriculture, processing and all that.
As long as it does not affect your primary.
Exactly. And then let's put together, with the assistance of the unions, the cooperatives, and all interested parties, even government departments that are specialized in the agri sector, to teach and empower civil servants and their families to generate this kind of services. It will help on the long run, and reduce a lot of pressure on the family.
So, in essence, if we have a better working environment, if we have a better training system, if we have better structure put in place that will support structure really, that will aid the efficiency of the civil servants, definitely we're going to see more progress, that we're going to see efficiency, we're going to see, you know, better service delivery from the civil service.
By the time I graduated from the university, we were not using computers. And those who were taught computers in the engineering, it was a punch card type that was accessible to just a few universities and maybe Ministry of Finance. Now the young graduates are coming out fully equipped with computer skills, if not on laptops, on their phones, because these smartphones are actually computing devices too. So if you're bringing such a young graduate into the way that is over-bureaucratized and is still working on old principles, you are going to frustrate him. So the service itself must modernize the processes, which is what the young person wants. And that's what the world is also doing today.
Interesting. And I know that the present government is actually determined to ensuring that they fast-track that it's e-government system, and I'm sure the graduate will be
NITDA,
exactly.
For example.
Thank you very much, you know, for having this conversation with us. We've spent, you know, quite a number of time, you know, talking about how to reposition the civil service, and of course we really appreciate your presence here. The acting chairman, National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission, Mr. Ekpo Nta, and thank you for sending your messages. Let me just take this quick one. And this one says, my appeal to concerned pension administrators is to please restructure the pension scheme where workers can can have access to at least 50% of what they contribute in every 5 to 10 years while in service, so that one can invest the money and of course make life worthwhile. Well, that is much we can take on the show today. Tomorrow certainly will be a continuation of what we have started today. And let's see you tomorrow, bright and early. Bye for now.